Discuss with National Urban League CEO Marc Morial. Marc, thank you for joining us. You know, on the economic policy, it's not apples to apples, but one big discrepancy is the corporate tax rate, where she's proposing a rise to 28%, and President Trump is proposing a cut to 15% for Made in America. That's a big gap, which could have some big implications on how corporations spend and hire.
Sarah, it's always been my view that the corporate tax rate is just one part of the conversation. Another part of the conversation is what you do about the myriad of special interest deductions and credits and exclusions that are so built in to the corporate tax rate. I like a corporate tax rate which at the very least creates a minimum tax for corporations, so they can't wiggle around the tax code and pay zero like many, many companies, in fact, do today. So that's what's important. There'll be a debate in Congress about where the best rate is, but I'd like to see a discussion about a rate that may be a little lower maybe than 28, but a little bit higher than 15. I like where it is today, but which puts a cap or an elimination of all of these loopholes. That's where the game in the tax code is.
Yeah.
And while it's nice to talk about all these tax credits and offsets, they tend to create an uneven playing field for corporations and an uneven playing field for economic policy. So that's kind of been my take for a long time. A good rate, a minimum rate, but let's try to see if we can get all of the special interest loopholes out of the tax code for corporations.
I'm not sure either of them are talking about that, but it is a good point. What about the rest of the economic vision that President Trump laid out? You know, 10 fewer regulations. Corporate America is going to like that for every new regulation introduced. The Government Efficiency Office, the plan to tax foreign nations to help pay down our deficit.
Trump's first term, he talked about eliminating regulations. In fact, he didn't. When he talked about eliminating regulations, he talked about cutting back on environmental and civil rights regulations. Those are non-starters for us. So there was a lot of talk in his first term and not a lot of action on these things. And people need to be careful of the hype. Secondly, most of his plan is a rehash and an effort, I think, to create, if you will, outsized benefits for large corporations versus much more of a focus on smaller startups, those that are in the middle. That's where we need to put the investment, the juice, and the incentives. And so I think that's so key. But I also think that we can't forget in this discussion about economic policy, the remaining work that has to be done to implement the Biden plan, infrastructure, manufacturing, the Inflation Reduction Act. There are many components that the next president will have an opportunity to execute that I think are as important as any of these new ideas, because the Biden plan was so bold and it was so imaginative. And it's why we've got the kind of economic rebound since COVID, unprecedented in modern American history after a recession. So this is not operating independent of what's happened over the last 3 years. And the question is, who's going to retain those policies? Who's going to execute the infrastructure plan, rebuild roads, bridges, water systems, and the broadband system? Who's going to make sure that this manufacturing investment, in fact, helps us create a competitive advantage? And who's going to make sure we invest in the kind of new industries we need to confront climate change? That's on the table as well.